Good evening and welcome to another episode of Apolitically Incorrect Guyana. My name is Kian Jabour and look who's back.
Your co-host, Tim Jonas.
My co-host. He was very sick last week and there is a horrible flu going around.
I'm sorry I missed last week.
No, it's okay.
I don't know. I came down with the flu and I have never had the flu for 8 days straight. I'm on my 9th day and I'm recovering slowly, but still coughing and still, under the weather.
This probably indicates that I won't be here next week because he's definitely still contagious. Nonetheless, our viewers, as little as they are that exist, got to listen to me rant and rave last week, coming back after a 3-month hiatus. So I just want to apologize because I know nobody likes listening to Kian and his ramblings by himself.
I'm sure the usual suspects had their comments about it.
Why not? It's the easiest thing to do. Anyways, but I brought back the voice of reason, okay? So not just me and my madness. We are back after a couple months. I've explained to everybody previously last week that there were some technical difficulties with the studio, but we are back up and running everywhere. I'm sorry to all the other stations because I haven't been sharing on our stuff. We usually have a system that we're supposed to share. So we ourselves are getting back into our groove. So please bear with us as we work out our technical side. Nonetheless, we have an interesting show. We missed 3 months. And when I came
3
back...
months or 3 weeks? 3 months? No,
I feel like it was a long time.
It's been a long time.
It's been a long time.
3 or 4 weeks.
Okay, maybe 3 weeks. No, it has to be longer than that. Anyways, nonetheless, what's crazy to me is over the last week, I feel like more has happened during this little period than what we have missed over the last couple of weeks of not having a show.
Well, what's going on is we are going into an election season. So we're seeing new hopefuls that are, holding themselves out to see the reaction just in case they want to get into the political arena.
Yeah.
We're seeing the usual rise in tensions and rise in the crosstalk and the mutual accusations and all of that.
What did the gutter politics is what you're looking for?
Snide, snarky, inane comments that you see on Facebook by the usual suspects that have no depth and no content but make noise. So you're seeing that and you're seeing an increase in it. But you're also seeing developments in meaningful, real issues that are coming up and need to be looked at and discussed and part of Guyana, life in Guyana. Problems, observing the problems, identifying the problems, and hopefully suggesting solutions to problems.
Good. I think we're gonna start with what we were gonna talk about last, actually. Let's talk about new players coming in, new potential players coming in, and the government's reaction, and opposition's reaction for that matter. I'm gonna bring up the fact that at this point in time, Azruddin Mohammed has been the talk of the town. All right, he's been making his rounds through different communities. We recently saw him in Barbados on his trip that caused a big ruckus to the point where our vice president made some very nasty comments about Barbados, which I don't know why he would go after the country.
Well, it wasn't as far as to say nasty, but he was kind of dismissive about Barbados as a destination and as a country, and unnecessarily so. I think it was uncalled for.
I say nasty because if somebody said those kind of things about Guyana, we would take high offense to it. So that's why I say that.
There is that, but Guyana Barbados is a worldwide renowned tourist destination.
Absolutely.
They got large flights going in there every day from all around the world. They're a real country where their systems work, where their police are efficient, where their customs operate efficiently, where there's no doubt about the systems, the political system, the judicial system, everything works in that country.
Yep.
And given its size, 12 square miles, we are embarrassed by comparison because very few things work in this country. I think maybe we need to look at them as a model and stop finding excuses for our own faults. I have great admiration for the Bajans.
Absolutely.
And their leader, Ms. Motley, is a world-class intellect and a world-class figure and faces problems and deals with those problems at any level. And I only have admiration for her.
Yes.
We weren't dismissive of her when they came in. And she came in 2020. to help us count votes. Apparently, our system doesn't even allow us to count votes. Bajans have never complained about rigged election, and they had to come and help us with that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. No, I'm with you all completely. And I think somebody said it best. I can't remember where I saw the post, but it said, if Mia Motley is listening, we'd like to state that our vice president does not speak for all of us. We all are big fans and love Barbados, and we look at them as a sister island, much like Trinidad or Jamaica, St. Lucia, Grenada, all the Caribbean islands.
and we hope we can find a Guyanese Mia Motley to come and take over this place. Maybe it'll start running better.
If you have a sister, a Guyanese cousin, or somebody, nonetheless. Getting back to what brought about this Barbados conversation is we've been watching some very interesting scenarios play out with this Mohammed scenario. Now, I'd like to start and premise this conversation by stating he has not made any public announcement in any way, shape, or form officially yet that he is even entering the political arena, that he is even putting his hat in the ring. So I think at this point in time, he needs to be viewed as a citizen, a normal, non-political citizen. He's made political comments, etc. And I can understand why the government would, feel threatened by those comments. But what I think needs to be discussed is their reaction to him, whether it's him or anyone else.
Well, I wouldn't say he's a citizen per se, that he's just an ordinary man on the road. He's obviously putting out feelers there, testing the water to see how warm it is and what kind of reaction he's going to get.
Okay.
The man is going all over the country. He is talking to people. He is holding bottom house meetings. He's doing the usual, hugging babies and hugging mommies and smiling at everybody and, talking about the good he can do. And I think he wants to see what the response will be to see if he can get any traction. I think that's what's going on now. Time will tell.
Okay. Agreed. Okay.
What I find interesting is
Right.
the size of the response.
Good. That's what we need to
Vitriol
talk
in the response.
whether him or anyone else.
The politicians have
Yes.
responded with noise and vitriol and threats, and I find that interesting.
I do. That's, I think, is the key. And I think we need to point it, because what I have noticed recently, just in my, again, very casual social conversations, is I don't think people have really realized the kind of response that he is getting right now. And what I mean by that is he has such large crowds. He's getting so much support in different villages all over the country, to the point where the government, the PPP party, is sending I don't want to call them anti-protesters, but anti-Mohammed's protesters. Counter-protesters, I guess, if you want, to wherever he is going to cause, make noise and try to stop the meetings and cause disruption. And I am floored by that. For you to go as far as sending protesters out to stop a meeting that for whatever is occurring, you have to be very threatened. You didn't just choose to do this because you got nothing else to do.
I've got a theory about that.
Go ahead, please lay it on.
Where you see what they call Team Mohammed, as the expression, where you see Team Mohammed going is in the villages. The popular cliche that people like to say is the grassroots. Now, Guyana's voting demographic is obvious to anybody that looks at it. At the grassroots level, chances are you vote along ethnic lines. There is blind loyalty there. So village by village by village in the rural areas, if a village is Afro, it's PNC. If a village is Indo, it's PPP. Straight. The swing voters tend to be more urban, professionals, academics, and living in the towns. So where both parties, especially given now that the demographic is so evenly balanced, that the PPP is only winning by 1 seat, APNU only won by 1 seat, given that margin is so small, the parties have traditionally tried to show how fair and balanced and one Guyana they are, reaching across the threshold to greet people that don't look like them, in the hopes that they will woo or lull or fool or whatever expression you like, those independent thinkers who may be inclined to vote across that racial barrier. Where we see T. Mohammed is in the strongholds. And that is a real
For both sides.
that is a real
Yeah,
threat.
Linden.
Because
yeah.
if enough of those entrenched rural villagers are swayed by the promises of T. Mohammed and by the aura of T. Mohammed, because let's face it, there is an aura that is associated with wealth and appearance and all of that, then you lose your base. And if the difference between the two parties is 5,000 votes or one seat, that's a serious danger.
Yeah.
I think that is why he's riling them.
Okay. I like it. I like it. And I think, okay, I'm going to actually do the PPP a favor here. Okay? There's a comment that just came through, and I think it's very critical we talk about it. It says, if Mohammed runs, he will draw votes from the third parties and APNU. Okay? That's what the comment is. Now, in other words, he will not draw from the PPP. Okay. The first thing I think I need to talk about is statistically, the swing voters in Guyana come from the PPP. Okay? If there's anything that our recent history has taught us, is that the rice farmers, the sugar workers, the typical Indo country villagers, and farmers, etc., are the ones that sway. All right? The numbers, even down to AFC's numbers, show that. With that said, there are PNC voters that swing as well, but clearly not as, statistically, clearly not as much as the PPP voters swing.
I'm not sure I agree with that.
Go ahead.
Because again, you are trying to take statistics from the rural areas, and I don't think that you will find those statistics bear you out. The changes that occur in Georgetown in Region 4. You will have a.
But that's not what happened with AFC.
You will have a slight swing. For example, the AFC went to Region 6
right.
The last elections, and they got some votes there. Region 6 is notorious for the independence of thought of the people.
Yes.
So that is an area that, if they're not happy, they emotively can change on a dime.
Good.
But for the most part, I believe that if you look at AFC at its height, when it was getting 35,000 votes, and the split between PNC and PPP was very small. When AFC lost all of those votes in 2020, the split between PNC and PPP remained very small.
Good.
And that tells me that the AFC supporters who left en masse left in equal numbers to go back home to PNC and to PPP, and it means that essentially the same number had come over from PNC and PPP to support the AFC at the time.
I like it. I like the reverse. I like the reverse math. But I also have to point out Essequibo. And Essequibo has notoriously, within the last few election cycles, been showing huge numbers that are willing to swing.
Well, don't let's say huge numbers.
But huge numbers in the small margins is what I'm saying. Significant enough numbers to make a difference.
All right. So again, we're just talking nuances here. We're talking small numbers.
But there have to be small numbers because, again, if it's only 5,000 or 6,000 people that are making the difference, the numbers are going to be small.
And the difference that you see, I think, for the most part, is in the large town areas, the urban areas. So Georgetown, New Amsterdam, maybe up in Springfield, you see in the urban areas that there is a change.
Okay,
but I think for the most part in a village, if you go to Lusignan, if you go to Victoria, if you go to Beirut, you don't see changes in the villages.
I'm gonna challenge. Not challenge you. I'm going to just. I want to show something else. Just statistically, there were three main third parties that ran in the 2020 election: ANUG, LJP, and Change Guyana. Okay, Change Guyana got the second most votes of all the third parties, and that came from Essequibo region, almost exclusively. Okay, again, this is just me being at the recount and knowing the numbers. Then there was LJP Schumann, who got his majority of votes, small numbers from all over the hinterland. All right, and he was the third party with the most votes. And then there was ANUG with another 2,000 something, and we got our votes from the middle class rural Georgetown. So when I looked at the numbers of where the third party / swing voters came from, again, I am not seeing it from the PNC strongholds. And again, that's 6,000. Those three parties alone were one seat. All right, 6,000 plus votes. Each one had 2,000 plus.
And Region 4, where New United Guyana got its votes, is not a PNC stronghold.
It is a PNC stronghold, but you know just like I do, the where our votes came from were more Indian dominant areas. It didn't come from Agricola. It didn't come from Tiger Bay. It didn't come from Albystone. It came from your Kitty, your Sabrianville, your Diamond, your was it Rich People Place called? Windsor Estates.
I equate South Rumbelt or Agricola with those rural areas. I equate South Rumbelt with Buxton, for example, or Victoria. They South do no matter what you do, and I heard internally in the PPP that they complained because, as you know, they went to build roads and dig drains in South Rumbelt,
right? And
still at the local government elections had no response, no result. Just like Linden,
right?
They will vote one way,
okay.
And for the most part, that's what's happening, and that's what you see.
Yeah.
So you do have to look to identify the demographic that will swing, and I'm sorry, I don't agree with you that it necessarily identifies as a PPP supporter who is leaving. I think that you got to look at the demographic of the people who live in Georgetown, and that demographic is a lot of mixed people.
Okay.
A lot of educated people, business people, academics, professionals.
Yeah.
That's what you got to look for, and I think they come from all sides.
I hear you. I'm in agreement, but okay, no problem. We could move on the conversation with this to the next point. So the next conversation that I think is important is one, the impact that the Berbice area had on the 2015 and 2011 election.
That was important.
All right, those are huge numbers. Again, a area that Mohammed's is getting huge support in.
But let me interrupt you and ask you, how many votes did Nagamutu take when he went over to AFC from his own village? I think he took two. We're assuming he's one, and we hope a family member is another.
We hope.
Good.
Agreed. Which more shows that okay. Okay. And then we can move across to Essequibo, where the T. Mohammed is getting big support as well. I was in Essequibo a week after he was there, and when I landed there, he was the talk of the town.
Yeah.
All right? Everyone was discussing it.
No, I can confirm. People have been calling me. Folks who supported the idea of a third party, who have expressed support for voting for neither PNC nor PPP, and have said to me that they like what Mohammed represents and they will support Mohammed. And these are simple, ordinary folk who take this position because they're disillusioned, disaffected with what they have, and they want to change. And they're seeing that as a possible rallying ground.
We're coming back to the same point, but the important factor that I think is not being taken into consideration here by the PPP, and I think it's something that reared its head again in 2011 and 2015, was the amount of hardcore PPP supporters that protest and show their dislike for what is going on with their party by staying home. Now, why I say that is they're not necessarily going to go and vote for anybody else. They're not going to vote for third party. They're definitely not going to vote for PNC. But if you look at, again, the voter turnout, which I believe this election is going to have a very low voter turnout in comparison to 2015 and 2020, I believe that statistic, those couple thousand people, and again, the numbers are very thin. Don't think it's 50,000 people staying home. I'm talking about 5,000 people staying home is a big deal, right? It changes the whole game. And if those 5,000 people stay home, 3,000, 2,000 from Berbice, 2,000 from Essequibo, and then 1,000 from Georgetown, it's not a lot of people we're talking about in areas that have 30, 40, 50,000 people voted. Now, if those small numbers stay home and don't vote, What we can almost guarantee is App News numbers, which they always do, are going to come out. App News voters don't change very much. And again, if you go back in the numbers all the way back 2011 and pre, and then come forward to the point where they won in 2015, they just got stronger and stronger and stronger. Fast forward to 2020, App News, as much as everybody disliked them and people vexed, App News numbers came out. That's why that's why the PPP only won by 1 seat, right? So App News support hasn't been swaying a lot. PPP's numbers, on the other hand, have had a much larger sway to me, right? Whether it be people crossing over or people staying home. Now, we're all going to come back, whether we agree or disagree on it. We're all going to come back to the same conversation right now of the reason we are having this conversation currently is because how much people are coming out and showing their support online, showing their support, willing to go onto camera and talk about their how disheartened they are or how much they're willing to support somebody else, signifies how much people in this country are looking for a change.
I'll tell you why this is massively important. The reason this is so vitally fundamental is that the winning party got 33 seats. So that if anybody comes along who can steal 5,000 votes from one side and 5,000 votes from the other side, the end result is that the winning party does not have majority in parliament. That's why it's fundamentally important. Now, AFC managed to do it, and AFC have destroyed themselves. They're trying to get some traction. We'll see how that plays out. But if, as you say, Team Mohammed throws their hat in the ring and says we're contesting this election, and if at the grassroots level where they are going and getting that support, getting that response, they can entice 5,000 votes from either community.
Agreed.
So that they get 10,000 votes, 2 seats.
Agreed.
The end result is that the government will only have 32 seats or 31 seats.
Agreed.
And that is fundamental because that means that the opposition control parliament.
Yes.
And when that happens, I think in Guyana at this stage, all hell will break loose because I know that people are listening and people are understanding that people talk about a strong opposition. That is foolishness if the strong opposition got 32 seats.
They can't do anything.
No such thing as a strong opposition with 32 seats.
Agreed.
Let's get that out of our heads. But if we have a strong opposition with 33 seats, so that they are actively passing laws, they have their own parliamentary council who are advising them and drafting legislation that they want, so that you can no longer have sole sourcing for contracts awarded by the government. You can no longer have government control of the Natural Resource Fund because Parliament run by the opposition changes that. Then we will have a different dynamic in Guyana. And I think that is what the fear is. So the question doesn't really turn on who you're taking votes from. If Team Mohammed or anybody else is able to take 5,000 votes from either side, from both sides, that changes the game in Parliament. And that radically changes the political landscape in Guyana for the better.
100% for the better. There's no question about that. A minority government is what is needed for accountability and transparency by the executive.
And there's no, I think, a recognition among the parties. AFC didn't realize that. I don't know why they had lawyers in the AFC who understood it.
I believe they had a vengeance against the PPP.
Yes.
Which has blinded them to what the betterment of the country.
Their intention was to devise a means to take over governance, not to fix the system. They like the system when they're in power.
That's right.
So their objective was to get power so that they could use the dictatorial power that
to go after the people they don't like.
To do what they want.
Yeah, I'm with you. You're right.
If they recognize that by being majority in opposition in Parliament, they can then meaningfully participate and meaningfully make the decisions at that level. They can make use of it for the benefit of the country as a system. And I think that's more important, but hopefully that penny has dropped. Hopefully they recognize it.
No, it's, again, I also want to point out another statistic that I think everybody has to remember. If all the third parties, and this is just going to just chuck me into my next point just on this matter before we shift off, is if all the third parties that ran in 2020 had come together, we could have potentially had a minority government right now because it was almost 10,000 votes, right? Meaning they would have gotten a seat outright and they may And
It was
I
a
didn't do the math.
possibility.
They may have had the largest remainder.
The math was very, very close.
Very, very narrow. We're talking about a couple hundred votes, literally a couple hundred.
It was very close.
So very close. But again, and a unification of the third parties would have probably pushed them to the on the same ballot, probably pushed them in that direction. The reason I bring that up now is I'd like to speak to all the potential third parties out there. As two people here with years of experience now in politics, having run a campaign in 2020 from start to finish as a third party with 5 or 6 other third parties that had run. My advice to you, just like I'm giving it to us ourselves, is unless we start working together, it really reduces our chances of creating the minority government. The third parties and candidates need to put their ego aside, and we have to come together and work on this. All right? Everyone has to work together for a minority government to be the reality. Right?
Well, I'm afraid I agree entirely with what you're saying. One of the problems that happened in 2020 is there was a cacophony of noise. So there was no real meaningful message and no single group that the independent voters, independent thinkers could rally around.
Yeah.
So they were kind of left in the wilderness trying to decide which one was the most meaningful, the most feasible, having rejected the two large parties. That job was much easier back in 2006 and 2011 when AFC was the third party.
Yes.
Because when you're not happy with the two large parties, as increasingly people weren't, they went to the AFC. It was the logical thing to do, and the AFC became the cornerstone that represented the third party that rejected the two large ones until they did what they did. So you have to plow that ground again and start over. You have to lay that pitch again. And slowly that is happening. But I also want to encourage the folk who are thinking about throwing their hat in the ring that it's important also, not once you identify what your vision is and what you want for the country, not to compromise. A lot of people say politics is a dirty game and they justify decisions that are dubious ethically by saying, oh, it's politics. No such thing. Politics is an abstract. It doesn't exist. It's invisible. You can't show me a politics. So individuals either are ethical or they are not. And it is important to align yourself with people who are ethical, who are competent, who know what they're doing, and who have a vision, and who are loyal and trustworthy. Once you do that, I think people recognize those qualities, and people will then begin to look to you as somebody who is feasible,
who they can trust
and is trustworthy.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it is important not to compromise that quality.
Absolutely. And the entire psychology of getting people to vote for you is to have them build confidence in you. They need to be confident that you will do what's best for them if elected. So, aligning yourself with the wrong people, jumping from party to party, etc., making comments that, are all over the place without a clear message leads people to be confused, maybe not trust you, and again, just lose confidence altogether.
The sad thing about our political culture is you can point to hundreds of examples where the representatives of each of the two large parties are guilty of this.
Yes.
You got one where you pretend that there's no, what they call it, concussion roads, and then as soon as you're confronted with it, you change what you say and you say, oh, we're going to put asphalt on that road.
Oh, that's my topic today.
You go and you appear in public and you say $200,000 per household, and as soon as you're confronted with it, you change without remorse, without saying, no, we were talking nonsense, $100,000 a person. On the flip side, you got Mr. Norton in Parliament the other day saying that, yes, we banned products and we were proud of it. Now, Guyanese, nobody who listens to those things can take those comments seriously. But we have this bad habit that if the comment comes from a representative of the party to which we are loyal, we let it go. We turn a blind eye, we pretend it didn't happen. But as soon as the other side does it, we have millions of examples that we can point to. You said this, you said that. It's time that we recognize the failings of those people who are pretending to represent us, who are, by offering tokenism, getting loyalty based on ethnic allegiance rather than anything else, and reject both.
Yeah.
And hopefully you will see someone emerge representing a third force, a force that has rejected both of the ethnic lines and is coming to you talking about policies, talking about ideas, talking about systems, not saying, don't trust those terrible people, look what they did last time. It's really time for that political culture to change.
Enough said. And I think it does, it kind of segues nicely into our next conversation. And this is by far, the most important issue in this country. All that we just said, all the elections here, sanctions, tariffs, oil money, I don't care. It doesn't matter. It has nothing to do with anything if we are not keeping our citizens safe, if we are not keeping our children safe. And why I say it segues is because where this conversation is going to lead is it's going to lead to us stating that it's everyone's responsibility to look after our weakest in society, our children in particular. Robbie, I'm going to ask you to bring up, there was a forum, I think it's currently ongoing actually over the weekend, of sexual assault victims to raise awareness for what's currently ongoing in Guyana as a major issue, which is sexual violence, sexual harassment, and issues within the sexual range. Cases that have been reported, people that are victims. So they've done this huge thing at the Guyana that they're trying to speak as much as possible about how people's lives have been affected and really break down the root causes and issues that we're dealing with in Guyana. Now, the head of the program, I think her name is Dr. Husbands. She did her speech on either Wednesday or Thursday, and she revealed some statistics that have floored anybody with a heart, anybody who is didn't know before and took the time to read this, and we really couldn't believe the numbers that she put out. And the only way I can do this is to bring it up. Robbie, can you just bring up the statistics on sexual reported cases? Sorry?
Yeah, you gotta find it.
Yeah. I'm gonna just switch it on to Instagram so they can see. So this is the numbers that she revealed during the week this week. And it states that 70% of sexual assault cases in Guyana involve children, with over 300 cases being reported monthly. Now, just let me finish reading it. More than 300 cases of sexual assault are reported monthly in Guyana, according to the manager of the Sexual Offences and Domestic Violence Policy Unit at the Human Services Ministries, Dr. Kona Husbands. She also revealed that 70% of those cases involve children as victims. Dr. Husbands shed some light on this on Tuesday. Now, I have to let that sink in for 2 seconds here. 300 cases a month? And this is only what's reported. All right? Now, I'm going to go a little further. I'm going to state some other numbers for you. She said of the 300 cases that are reported every month, only 50% of them ever reached court. And only 10% of that 50% lead to convictions. Now, I just want to break that down for everyone. That means 150 of these cases are reported and cast off with, done with, never heard of again. The other 150 cases get to court, and only 15 of the 150 lead to convictions. Like, these numbers have to be, these are children. Like, is nobody speaking about this? And I'm sorry. We could talk about politics all we want. We could talk about oil. We could talk about how much money we make. We could talk about what road they build. We could talk about what bridge they build. We could talk about progress all we want. This is 300 children a week. A month. It could be 300 children a week for all we know.
Yeah.
This is craziness. This is beyond comprehension. And
that's 10 a day.
Yeah, it's 10 a day. 10 children a day in Guyana
Reported.
are being sexually molested.
Reported.
Are being reported. And we all know how much more are not being. And I think that's the conversation that we're going to quickly slip into. And Tim, I'm going to ask you, because I know the angle you're going to come at when you speak about this and us taking responsibility for this. I need you to some ways connect that to people understanding that the politics is also their responsibility, because those politicians and policymakers that we put there are the ones that are now responsible for ensuring that the systems are in place to protect children.
You know, it's funny, as you were speaking, for full clarity, let me say that when I walked in here this evening, I did not know what we were going to talk about. And so I'm taken by, not by surprise, but this is something that I have to respond ad hoc off the cuff. So I want to start by telling you that when I was a young lawyer, back in the 90s, 100 years ago, I did work at Legal Aid, the Legal Aid Clinic. Now, the Legal Aid Clinic is a place where people who cannot afford representation go. And I managed that clinic for several years before I went into private practice full time. The large chunk of work in legal aid involves cases of domestic violence, domestic abuse, and that includes child abuse, abuse of children. It's a sickness in our society, it's an illness, it's a disease that we have. And I firmly believe the reason that disease runs rampant is that our systems are so broken down that there is a sense of invulnerability, that no one is going to catch you, no one can do anything about it. And I want to talk about our culture and why I'm coming to that conclusion. I can't remember his name, but a convicted child molester, someone who killed many, many children in the States before he was executed, he was interviewed. And he was asked, well, one of the questions he was asked is, well, how do you target a child? How do you identify a child and say this is somebody who is a suitable victim? And his answer was interesting. He said he looks at the father, and if the father looks like someone who is not going to represent a position, so is not a strong person, an affirmative person, someone who looks after his child and his family, then he recognizes immediately that that child is more vulnerable than another child would be. Now, in our society, don't worry about the father literally. Worry about the father in the larger sense. Worry about the father as in our police service. Our father, the father as in the village community. If you live in villages in Guyana, there are a couple of expressions I want to point out to you, and they will immediately resonate because every Guyanese hears it. I don't have time for that. Every Guyanese who wants to sidetrack or avoid a moral responsibility, whether it's to stop at the pedestrian crossing, or whether it's to report, or whether it's to do the right thing, says, I ain't got time for that. And with those 5 words, he goes about his business, allowing a wrong to be done. That's part of our culture, avoidance. The second part of our culture is, I don't want to get involved. Another cliche in Guyana, I don't want to get involved.
That's not my business.
So you hear the neighbor harassing his wife, beating his child. You see abused people running up the road screaming, and you close your doors, you close your windows, you pretend you didn't see, because you don't want to get involved. You don't want the inconvenience of being subject to scrutiny by the authorities who may be asking you questions, subject to possible threats by the perpetrator of the violence, even though he's your neighbor. And in your stark hypocrisy, next morning you will wake up and say to that same perpetrator, good morning, neighbor, on your way to work. We got to take responsibility personally, each of us, and recognize that if someone is a social deviant, if someone is violent, whether that violence is directed at their wife, at their children, if someone behaves in a way that is not acceptable, they need to be treated in a way that is not acceptable. They cannot be welcomed back. Another thing you hear Guyanese say is, all right, you do the biz, my friend. And you hear that a lot in politics. They talk about it across the aisle. He's my friend, but he thief it. He's my friend, but he's corrupt. If he's stealing, he's not your friend. If he's abusing his wife or his child, he's not your friend. And if he's your friend, then you're just as bad and just as contemptible as he is. Mm-hmm. So, first of all, we need to take personal responsibility ourselves as neighbors. Second of all, that feeling of invulnerability arises because of the incompetence of the police force. Now, the police are stymied because when they go and knock on the neighbor's door to say, did you see what happened? Did you hear what happened? No, everybody minding the business, so nobody saw, nobody heard. Their jobs are that much more difficult because Guyanese don't accept their social responsibility in the face of a growing disease. So we become more violent, and that violence manifests in the house, with your wife, with your children. There was on Facebook the other day, video footage leaked from the police of a man shooting his wife. Horrifying stuff. The outcry comes when you're confronted with it, but every Guyanese knows it happens every day. Violence happens every day in the home, in the school, in the business, in the workplace. It happens all over. And the people who are perpetrating it are often those same people in power, those same politicians who smile and are brash and are abusive and know that nothing can happen to them. It's got to change. It is totally unacceptable and it has to change, but it starts with personal responsibility. It starts with drawing your own line in terms of ethics, morality, and saying, I will not acknowledge somebody who I know is doing that. Help where you can. Stop it when it's happening. Report it to the police, and then help the police when you can. We got larger problems because then you got to address how the police investigate.
I'm just about to get to that.
How the police investigate, how they prosecute.
And Tim, that does deter so many people. You know that your neighbor is abusing his wife. Let's say you call the police. All of a sudden, the police show up and nothing is done. A bribe is paid. You know, it's disregarded because, as they just said, only 10% of them lead to convictions. Only 50% even make it to court. So you have a 50-50 chance that it may not go anywhere. And then because of how the police have handled that situation and that there is no sort of accountability, no repercussions, you now have just made an enemy of your neighbor. And you're sitting there every day now having to deal with an empowered neighbor that has been confronted about his abuse, but has gotten away with it, if you will. And the system has failed. So
Okay.
what then?
Yes. So that needs to be fixed. We need a more competent police force, and we've spoken about paying the police more, training the police. You cannot pay peanuts and expect to get professionals. The problem with the police force is much more deep-seated, but it needs to be addressed, I agree. The other side of the problem is economics. The women who are at home find themselves financially dependent on the abusive man. They cannot get out of the situation.
Yeah.
Now, that is a part of Guyana economics. We have spoken about, we look at these cash handouts, and we have spoken on this program about empowering women by awarding cash handouts to women, allowing women a monthly amount of money for each child that woman has. So mothers must get money so that they have the dignity and they have the wherewithal, if they're in a situation that they don't like, to get out.
Yeah.
How often do we read in the papers about a mother or a wife who is usually the victim and therefore is the witness that you rely on in court and that the police is relying on, turning up and saying to the magistrate, I don't want to proceed, I don't want to give evidence. Why?
Yeah.
Because it didn't happen? Because they know that there is no financial security if that violator is imprisoned or if they pursue. So they're faced with the threat from him, they're faced with the knowledge of the loss of financial support, and we also know that a lot of these perpetrators, their families support them. So I'm sure you'll remember the incident of the man beating his daughter, and then the family hiding it.
Yeah.
Another man abusing his wife. I think he killed her, and his mother trying to hide the evidence.
Yeah.
So if you have a situation where you're pressed by your family, where you're financially dependent, we are creating helpless women. And let me tell you something, helplessness creates a victim. If you don't have self-empowerment, if you don't have the wherewithal, you are helpless and you become a victim. So I would like to see the evolution of a system where the women who are mothers, starting with them, are empowered so that the next time you see cash handouts, it is going to women, it is done on a monthly basis, to women who have children, so that they have the wherewithal to send their children to school, look after their children, but they then also have the dignity and the wherewithal, if they are victims of abuse, to walk away.
Yeah.
If we don't have that, we will continue to have abuse. If neighbors turn a blind eye, we will continue to have abuse. And if people feel invulnerable because they know the police can't do them anything, there will continue to be abuse.
Absolutely. Well said. I'm gonna have to cut that clip out and put it out separately. I'm gonna point out something really, really sad here, Tim. You know, since we started talking about this topic in comparison to elections matters and politics, our viewership has dropped. Like, I'm looking at it right here on the screen, and that is right then and there. You know where the problem is, right? These nobody cares, and why I say nobody cares is because I'm going to be as realistic as possible, Tim. People can't care, okay? When you're in a country where 47%, according to the last WHO or PAHO statistic, where 47% of your country lives in extreme poverty, then the other 40%, and I say 40% because we are not going to count the 10% that live in lavishly and have plenty of money and rich, but the other 40% are barely making it. And they themselves don't have time or care to sit here and listen to a situation that they ain't got time for because they got work to survive.
Or they're uncomfortable with it and they recognize that they are being confronted with their own feelings.
Maybe.
You see, part of a democracy is it's easy to raise a hue and cry and talk about the feelings of your leaders, and this should be done and that should be done and something should be done about it.
But take responsibility is another story.
Personal responsibility is different.
Is another story. To take personal accountability is another conversation. And that is one that, you know, it's really a scenario now that, and I mean this, I have to get political because it has to get to political. Tim, we are a hyper political country. We are not normal political. Politics, because of how our constitution and laws are written, the government, the executive controls everything in this country. Okay? Down to the most minute thing. If they want to turn the screws on you, they can make your life a living hell, even though you are a perfectly good law-abiding citizen. Yeah. If they want to fix a problem tomorrow, it's fixed.
Yeah.
If you want to change the laws to tap into and turn the natural resource fund, our biggest bank account, into your personal piggy bank, they will do that in one day in Parliament.
It's done.
Okay, it's done. So the question has to come up. Is there political will to fix this problem?
But Kian, we see and we hear reports of domestic violence and sexual abuse all the way to the
top ministers.
Through the
absolutely
political divide on both sides.
Yep.
And
on both sides.
We hear about internal wranglings where female members of political parties are saying that they've been exploited. We hear rumors about the male members of political parties exploiting the people in the areas when they make outreaches, when they go out, giving promises, that kind of thing. That's the culture. So what we have is we have evidence of people who are leading us who are as bad as or worse than the perpetrators that we're talking about.
Absolutely.
So you can't ask where's the will, because there's a smug confidence that we can live as we want.
I'm gonna bring up something here because this conversation, obviously everybody listening, whoever knows who I am, knows of my challenges within this domain. And I have been accused before of domestic violence. All right. I was fortunate. In the context of I went through my court process. I did my due diligence. There was a trial that was had, and I can stand here today and say that matter is no longer in the courts, and I am here today having put that to rest. Now, why I brought that up is because of what you just said of the government and the people at the very top shielding. Now, why I say that is because when I went through my matter and it was in the news and it was all over the papers, I was in the papers every single day in Chronicle, on DPI. 5 ministers made posts about my scenario on their private personal social media platforms. 4 of which were female ministers, one of which is the one that was accused of rape in their cabinet. Now, that all the government had, all the PPP government had lots to say about me and my scenario. What I gathered, what struck me hardest after that situation was when their PPP executive and minister at the time, Dharamlal, was accused of rape. Their silence was deafening. All of those female ministers, you can count, and I think one or two of them have put out very, very extremely vague statements on kind of dismissing the scenario, and then talking about proof and you can't believe allegations or whatever it was. And if people did not pick up the staunch difference between those two dynamics, then they're not actually looking for where the flaw in the system is.
I think what we've done there is to what we started out talking about, the ethics of politics. That people will justify that and say, oh, it's politics.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing. They were right. When Dharmalal's issue arose, he was absolutely right that he had a right to a fair hearing and a determination, and nobody should prejudge.
Yes.
And I agree with that, and I celebrate that, and I uphold it. The thing is that the court of public opinion, where everybody, especially with social media, everybody has a soapbox, should inform you to be temperate and to try to be fair, even if it's to yourself, even if in the quiet voice in your head makes you tells you to try to be fair. You cannot, on the one side, launch an accusation and hysterically condemn somebody who has not been convicted because you don't like them and because they're on the other side of the political divide, when someone on your side of the political divide, faced with the same situation, who has not been convicted, you are silent and you say nothing at all. That shows an unethical approach to how we sell ideas to the people, how we sell ideas to Guyana. And I think that represents the dishonesty that is inherent in our political landscape. It's just one of many.
And I
don't think there's any fixing it, quite frankly, Kian. I think that's...
you say there's no fixing it, though, sorry, finish your statement.
Democracy is the best system that we have, but the fact is that democracy is marketing. And what happens is that the people who have the most money to pay the most trolls, to make the most noise on social media, get the most traction, even if they're spouting nonsense. And therefore, any idea of telling the truth, any idea of balance, of impartiality becomes irrelevant. What becomes relevant is how much space you can take up on social media in giving information or misinformation. And that has a disastrous end result, and that's what we're seeing now.
And it's unfortunate because we're faced with such horrific situations in this country of, again, just so you guys can understand, we're talking about domestic violence. We're talking about the 300 plus cases that are reported every month of sexual abuse of children mainly, and everything is swept under the rug. There is no systems being put in place. There is little to no work being done because these numbers did not just shoot up yesterday. All right? These numbers did not come about a month ago. This is something that has been ongoing. And whatever work that any government, past or present, has claimed that they should be praised for is clearly not working when you talk about 300 cases a month. Okay? And I'm sorry. You can make all the claims of how hard you're working all you want. Those numbers show that we are failing as a society. All right? And at some point in time, as Tim brought up, first and foremost, we the people have to take responsibility. We have to take responsibility for protecting those around us. We have to take responsibility for putting leaders in place that are not going to help us. All right? And you have to take that on your shoulders. All right? Don't sit down and pass the buck along. You voted for them. Don't cry wolf now. All right? You sat down and watched your neighbor being abused and did nothing. Don't pretend that there was nothing you could have done or there was a reason that nothing happened. I'm sorry. At the end of the day, you have to take some sort of personal accountability now. And this is what our society, our country is lacking. All right? With that said, Tim, I think that people are in a rock and a hard place in this country. All right, I know in every context. And it is, if you don't laugh, you're gonna cry, right? We've reached a situation now where everybody out there that will stand up and scream, well, we got new roads and we got a bridge and they're doing this and gas to energy and blah 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 and whatever, or money moving. That's always the big one. If our weakest in society are not protected, we have all failed. Okay, because our life is not about self-preservation. That's craziness. I posted something today that was funny. It was a boat sinking on my personal profile. It was a boat sinking, right? And half the boat has gone underwater and two people bailing it out. And they got two people on the top end of the boat that's above water screaming, "Boy, it's a good thing they're holding there by we side."
I think that's the problem too.
And they don't realize that you might be on top now up here. But, and I mean this in the most dramatic way possible, when shit hits the fan, all the money you got ain't gonna do nothing for nobody. And I say that because we watched it in Venezuela, right? We watched what has occurred right there. Now we pretend that we're better. We pretend that they're the big bad wolves over there, but it's knocking at our door currently.
And I think that as the system breaks down further, those folk who think they have a bubble around them, they have a bit of insulation, I think they're being faced with that reality. So that if your child is knocked down, or if your child is abused, or if something happens where you have to go and interface with the police or go and interface with the ministry, and you are then confronted with the profound level of incompetence and just lack of care that you encounter in almost every institution in Guyana, when you're exposed to that face to face and there's no minister you can call or no senior officer you can call, I think more and more those people who think they're insulated are being confronted with that. And they will have to accept their social responsibility at a personal level and start to do something about it. Or else we all find ourselves in the same boat. The systems are not working.
That's right. We are at 4:30. Tim, we have so many other topics that we needed to discuss, but I'm really happy we touched, I think, on the two big ones. All right. We're going to be back next week, providing he hasn't gotten me sick here. And hopefully we can continue the conversation. I don't even mind dedicating next week another portion of this to this exact same conversation, because it can't be said enough is the key.
I think if you don't mind, I would just want to close with this thought, that violence occurs because you can. It's because you're strong and you think someone else is weak. And the reason I'm putting it that way is that our discussion on sexual violence and domestic violence focus on men. But in Guyana, our Guyanese women beat their children mercilessly, and those children grow up learning that violence is the normal and natural response to a situation you're not happy about.
Yeah, and the schools as well, teachers.
I would like to say to the mothers and the teachers, think about when you stop beating your child. It happens the day that child is stronger than you. So you weren't beating the child because the child was wrong. You were beating the child because you could. And insofar as you are being strong and taking advantage of someone who is weak, you really should be ashamed of yourself. It is time to change our culture, because that same child will grow up understanding that violence is the first recourse, and will end up beating his wife, will end up in an accident on the road and fighting between drivers, will end up beating a child in school. Violence is not the answer, and if you inculcate violence in your children by the example you set, only one result will happen. We are seeing it play out in our society. Yeah.
All right, guys. On that note, we have come to the end of our show. I just before you click us off, I have to point this out. The government said, listen to the conversation we're having here. It's not even political. And I got comments. Just look at the trolls. The first thing out of one of the PPP trolls' mouth is, pay your electricity bill. And I sitting here going, this is the nastiness of these two big parties, the PPP and the PNC. They're just despicable, though. We're talking about a real problem here. It's not even political. Like, do they have no class? Do they have no moral capacity? Do they not care about anybody except for themselves? This is the PPP and the PNC for you. Nothing except for themselves do they care for. And at some point in time, you have to say something. It's just nastiness. And people have to start rejecting this bullshit. Tim, on that note, we are out of here, guys. Please be safe this weekend. We've had a mass amount of deaths on our roads. Oh my God. And police fighting. Please respect our police as much as you possibly can. I know it's hard. I'm not sitting here, being ridiculous. But also, please be very careful on the roads. It's very dangerous out there. There's lots of construction going on and people driving like crazy because of the traffic situation now. So guys, on that note, have a really safe and wonderful weekend. Tim and I will be back here next Friday.
Folks.
Thank you guys. Take care.